Hello and welcome. I'm Rawia Alami and this is the Dailies, where we take a look at important news stories, reports, analysis and articles published in newspapers and media outlets across the world. American newspapers focus today on the Republican senators' vote on several proposed amendments to President Trump's big tax bill in an attempt to gain the support of undecided Republicans. Newspapers reported on the latest developments, while many opinion articles discussed what to expect if the bill is eventually passed. The performance of the US dollar also, and the war in Gaza and the aftermath of the Israel-Iran war continued to draw the attention of many global news outlets and newspapers today. We'll start with the Washington Post, which, like many other American newspapers, reported on Senate Republicans' efforts to win over the final holdouts against President Trump's big, beautiful Tax and Immigration Bill Act. The newspaper published a controversial roundtable opinion analysis with two of its columnists about the bill, highlighting the sharply divided opinions surrounding President Trump's bill as it moves through the Senate. Also, supporters argue the bill fulfills Trump's promises by extending tax cuts and boosting defense. But critics from both parties say it goes too far, cutting Medicaid and food assistance, raising energy costs and adding trillions to the deficit. Some also, like Republican Senator Tom Tillis, warn the bill betrays Trump's pledge to protect Medicaid recipients, while analysts note that nearly 12 million Americans could lose health insurance. Others accuse lawmakers of using budget tricks to hide the bill's true cost. Even business leaders and top GOP donors are uneasy about new taxes on clean energy. Despite the drama, most expect the bill to pass, though not without controversy. The Wall Street Journal editorial commented on this as well, saying the Senate claimed that the bill will add $3.3 trillion to the deficit are misleading, blaming Washington's budget math for exaggerating the bill's true fiscal impact. The article spotlights a fierce debate over the true cost of the Senate's new tax and spending bill, while critics and the Congressional Budget Office say it will add $3.3 trillion to the deficit in 10 years. Also, the editorial argues that this figure is misleading. It points out that the official estimate assumes all of Trump's 2017 tax cuts would expire, which is probably or politically unrealistic. The editorial claims that measured against current policy, where tax cuts are extended, the bill would actually save $500 billion over a decade by slowing the growth of programs like Medicaid and food stamps. The article criticizes both parties for using budget tricks and concludes that despite flaws, the deficit blowout claims are exaggerated beltway accounting. The Financial Times reported on the drop in the value of the US dollar as it had the worst start to a year since 1973, tumbling over 10% in the first half of 2025. The report quotes analysts who blame President Trump's unpredictable trade policies, rising government debt, and also pressure on the Federal Reserve to cut rates, all of which have shaken global confidence in the dollar as a safe haven. The piece, by the way, also includes this graph of the US dollar and its value, the US dollar index, depicting this drop since January, showing the performance of the US dollar since 2020. You can see how there is a major drop since the beginning of this year, 2025. Now, the report also also points out that the decline has surprised markets, with the euro and other currencies surging as investors look elsewhere for stability. Trump's new tax and spending bill, expected to add trillions to the deficit, has fueled further concerns and led some investors to pull back from U.S. assets. The piece concludes that while the dollar remains the world's reserve currency, its rapid decline signals growing unease about America's economic direction. After President Trump signed an executive order to lift some financial sanctions on Syria to help stabilize the country, Israel Hayom published a report detailing Syria's reported demands for peace with Israel, as revealed by Lebanon's LBCI news channel and confirmed by regional sources as well. Syria is asking for official Israeli recognition of its new regime, a full withdrawal also from territories captured by Israel last December, and also an end to Israeli airstrikes in Syria, security arrangements as well in the south, and the U.S. guarantees for the Syrian government. The report goes on to say that in return, Syria may recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which is a major shift from past positions. However, sources say there is no firm consensus within Syria's leadership, and some prefer a limited deal rather than full normalization, especially while the Gaza war continues. The piece concludes that while talks are advancing, deep divisions and regional pressures remain. The New York Times published new satellite images showing intense activity at Iran's Fordow nuclear site after recent U.S. and Israeli airstrikes. The images reveal freshly built access roads, cranes, excavators, and crew working near bomb impact sites as Iran inspects the damage to its underground facility. The report also quotes experts who say Iran appears to be assessing the extent of the destruction rather than starting major repairs or reactivating enrichment. The U.S. dropped powerful bunker buster bombs on Fordow on June 22nd, with Israel striking access routes the next day. While President Trump claimed the site was obliterated, analysts and UN nuclear agencies say Iran could resume enrichment within months. The piece concludes that despite visible damage, Iran's nuclear program may not be fully halted. In its editorial, the Jerusalem Post highlights a troubling rise in violent attacks by extremist Jewish settlers in the West Bank, calling them the cancer of lawbreakers, with incidents increasing 30% in the first half of 2025. These attacks target Palestinians, or not just Palestinians, also Israeli soldiers, undermining societal norms and Israel's values. The editorial criticizes policy shifts under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government, which have emboldened these fringe elements, as it says. It goes on to say that while most Jewish residents in the territory seek peaceful coexistence and have valiantly served in the IDF, a small but growing group of lawbreakers threatens stability. The editorial welcomes the formation of a police task force to work with the IDF and security agencies to curb this violence. It concludes that this internal threat must be addressed decisively before it spreads, framing the issue as a matter of right and wrong beyond political divides. To The Guardian, which published a report highlighting a disturbing new Russian tactic in Ukraine's shadow war, recruiting young, desperate Ukrainians via Telegram for what seems like minor jobs, only to trick them into becoming unwitting suicide bombers. The story follows Ole, a 19-year-old who thought he was hired for a paint attack, but discovered he was carrying a crude bomb meant to kill him and others. Ukrainian security services say Russia has organized dozens of such attacks, often targeting teenagers and the unemployed, using a mix of promises, manipulation, and blackmail. The SBU has launched school awareness campaigns and set up reporting tools to counter this threat. The article concludes that Ukraine is a testing ground for Russian hybrid warfare, with fears these tactics could indeed spread to Europe. As wildfires rage across Turkey and weather alerts have been issued in France, Italy and Portugal, as a heat wave grips the Mediterranean, Le Monde interviewed Magali Regaza-Zit, who is a geographer specializing in adaptation to climate change and former member of the High Council for Climate. Regaza-Zit, in his interview, highlights the growing struggle to cope with extreme heat as climate change accelerates. He warns that emergency responses are no longer enough, and the gap between what needs to be done and what is actually happening is widening each year. Schools and workplaces are especially unprepared, with heat waves now disturbing exams and making classrooms and outdoor jobs indeed unsafe. The interview emphasizes the urgent need to renovate buildings for summer comfort, rethink school schedules and update labor laws to protect workers. Regaza-Zit emphasizes that cities must adopt structural solutions like thermal renovations and more green spaces, not just rely on air conditioning. The piece concludes that investing in climate adaptation now will cost less than dealing with the consequences of inaction later. And we'll go back to the New York Times, where we will end with a special report published by the newspapers highlighting the global race between the US and China to shape the future of energy. The report points out that China is rapidly expanding its clean energy industries, building more wind turbines and solar panels than the rest of the world combined, and exporting electric vehicles and batteries worldwide. Meanwhile, of course, President Trump's US is doubling down on fossil fuels, pushing allies to buy American oil and gas and rolling back clean energy policies. The piece notes that China's dominance in renewables is shifting global alliance and giving Beijing a new economic and political power, while the US risks falling behind in the fast-growing green economy. It concludes that the world's energy future and who leads it will be decided by which model other countries choose to follow. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.